but I think we're okay. So this is here. The lighting's not terrible. All righty. Good. You ready?
Let's take a photo first.
Let's go.
Okay. Hi.
Hello. Hello, my friends. Eric Feltus here, life coach, speaker, actor, and host of The Great Unbecoming. This is a show about stories of unlearning. What did you let go of in order to become the person you are today? And what did you gain and learn as well? This is a show about letting go of stories that no longer serve us and stepping into our own authenticity. It's about unbecoming what society says you should be and remembering who you are and who you are meant to be. So sit back, relax, and welcome to The Great Unbecoming. How are you? Good. He started. We're on a roll, y'all. Y'all know I don't cut anything. I have a guest with me today in my apartment. It's the first time I've had a guest over for a podcast. Usually they're online, so it feels really good to have you here.
Thank you. It feels really good to be here.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Y'all, this is my good friend, Michael Sasaki. And before we start, I want you to tell me that word that you were sharing with me earlier.
Bodhisattva.
Bodhisattva. Did I say that right?
You said it correctly.
Bodhisattva. And what does that mean?
Bodhisattva is one who cares for the well-being of others and wants others to be happy.
Cares for the well-being of others and wants others to be happy. I don't know if you can, if you're watching this online, it looks like there's a ghost in here because one of my lights keeps flickering. But the way you described it earlier, sorry, I went back to the topic.
It's a good ghost.
Yeah. Bodhisattva. But the way you described it earlier also had to do with like unlearning and like talk more about that.
So I practice Buddhism, and in Buddhism, there's a lot of figures that represent humanity, and we call them bodhisattvas. There's different kinds of bodhisattvas. And one of them, their main mission is to question conventions that have, been put in place by people. Just question life and question things that society has kind of put into place as rules. And their role is to question them and unlearn them and really see if those ideas create any value, right? So I think as gay men, we have that kind of role in society. We get to really bring so much color to established ideas and really go, does that work for everybody? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I think we have a unique role in terms of looking at it from that angle.
I just love like the way when he was describing it, it just sounds so much like what I would say is deconstruction, or just this whole podcast of unbecoming, right? Like letting go of whatever doesn't serve you and asking hard questions like, does this serve me? How does it serve me? Who am I with this either belief or lifestyle or relationship or way of thinking? And to dare to question, that takes a lot of courage.
Absolutely.
I will say, y'all, I've totally got ahead of myself. I didn't even really introduce my guest today. I usually start with the bio, which I didn't ask you to send me. So I'll say this. Michael and I have known each other for, I want to say like 5 years now.
Yeah.
We met on Instagram, both actors, helped each other through with some auditions online, and then met in person. And then I met his husband, Pierre, who I love. And Pierre and Michael are just two of my favorite people in LA. They're my people.
Oh, thank you.
And, but tell us, because I didn't have you send me a bio, a little bit about yourself before we get too deep into the conversation.
Sure. I am from Los Angeles. I'm a Japanese American. I used to be a competitive figure skater growing up. So that was like, I devoted myself all to that. And then I retired in my mid-20s and started coaching.
Skating. Yeah.
And then I quit coaching for a little bit to go skate on cruise ships in ice shows. Be a little showgirl for a few years.
Yeah.
And then my childhood acting desires or dreams, if you will, started speaking to me, and I was like, okay, I think it's time to do that. So I finally set my roots back here in LA and decided to take acting seriously. And so I've been acting now since 2007. And I'm also coaching skating again on the side. So,
And some of your credits, which especially lately have been amazing. What have you been on?
thank y'all. I recently appeared on Grey's Anatomy, which is a lot of fun.
Season 912.
Yeah, right. And then right before that, I got to do a really cool part on CSI Vegas. And we share Shameless together.
Yes. We were not on the same episode of Shameless, but we were both on an episode of Shameless, and ironically have kind of become friends with the other guys that were in your episode.
Oh yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it's a real weird small world.
Yeah.
One thing I love about Michael is, I come from this Christian background. Michael comes from this Buddhist background. I love the conversations we have about our upbringing and our different religious / spiritual beliefs. And I feel like we are so much more alike than we are different.
Oh my gosh,
but I also think that we inspire each other in our own spiritual journeys.
Totally.
You have kind of taught me how to chant Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo, which is something that I do for a while. I did on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I fell off. I'm back on it now after you and I talked last week about that. And it's really opened my eyes. And y'all, you can be, you can be atheist / agnostic as well, or agnostic, but you can be both Buddhist and Christian if you want. They actually don't cancel each other out.
They don't cancel each other out.
But I'm getting ahead of myself again. I want to talk to you about your own deconstruction, your own unlearning, and your own journey. So let's start kind of more towards the beginning. You grew up Buddhist.
I grew up Buddhist. That was ingrained in my life at a very young age. As a child. I was taught how to chant Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo, like you just shared. Maybe some of you guys have heard that phrase from Tina Turner, or late Tina Turner. It's a practice about really bringing out your inner potential. Yeah. Who you really are. And while those are very positive messages, as a child, being a closeted gay person, I deeply suffered with shame, not fitting in. And so, that experience led me to drug abuse. And so at some point in my life, I was experiencing substance abuse. And without going too deep into it, through my Buddhist practice and going through therapy.
Oh, pause. You are like glossing over a lot. So I'm going to rudely interrupt you as I do. So you grew up Buddhist, you knew you were gay. And are you telling me that the shame from being gay is one thing that led you to substance abuse?
Yes.
So what was your relationship with substance abuse? Like, what did you gain from substance abuse that was missing, or what were you avoiding? Can you say more about that?
Sure. I don't think so. When I first started abusing drugs, it was in high school. Right after I came out, I met this guy who just validated me. And he was like, he was straight acting. He rode a motorcycle. He fixed cars. So everything about him was not gay in the traditional sense, I guess.
Right.
And he was just the man that validated me. And so everything he did, I would do.
Sure.
And that also included doing drugs, and that was very, at the time I didn't understand codependency, but that was a codependent relationship that I had with him because I didn't want to be rejected by him. So if he says, do drugs, I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so he's the person that kind of initially got me introduced to
in high school. Wow. I don't know if I knew it was that young.
Yeah. But then, I went to college and we parted ways. And it was my senior year in college that I found drugs again. And it was, it was now on my own accord. And so that kind of continued throughout my life. Just this, I was never an addict in a sense where I needed every day to, function.
Yeah.
It was more like a recreational usage, but every time I used it, kind of my life would fall apart. So, there are a lot of people out there that use drugs and their lives don't fall apart.
Well, and I'd love for you to touch a little on how that affected your skating career. Like what was the trajectory of your figure skating career leading up to drugs?
Well, there was a point where I was still training and using. So in high school, I was, aiming to become an Olympian. I went as far as the Olympic trials, and I was already with this guy at the time, and so it wasn't like a frequent thing, but it was like, okay, I'll reward myself once a month, with partying. Because I worked so hard training, so it kind of became this like reward thing. And then it became a little bit more frequent. And eventually my skating did suffer as a result of kind of the intermittent partying, if you will.
Yeah.
So I think at one point I just knew that I wasn't going to make it to the Olympics. And I think that also kind of created this sense of failure and even more shame.
Sure.
So that was kind of that whole experience in my life of doing drugs, not making the Olympics, kind of was the genesis of a lot of the sufferings later on in my late 20s, in my early 30s, and even my late 30s,
The suffering you experienced?
The suffering, yes.
Say more about that.
Yeah. So, where do I start? This is so much unpacking. So let's see, where do I begin? So I retired from skating in my early 20s and I graduated college at the same time, around that time. And then I went on to do ice shows on cruise ships. So during this time, every break that I had, I would kind of relapse into, using drugs. And it seemed like every time I had a moment to myself, whether I was bored or I was on my own or was lonely, that's when I would kind of fall into this pattern. And looking back now, that loneliness, that boredom had to do a lot with the shame that I didn't want to face. And that shame and guilt was that I didn't make it to the Olympics because I partied.
Yeah.
I put, athletes put so much pressure on themselves to make it. Like, it's really a black and white kind of existence.
Yeah.
It's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And, the dedication, the amount of time you put into it, the money, everything, you just know there's so much at stake. And so for me to not make it to the Olympics, I equated that to I was a failure in life.
Sure.
So no matter what I did from now on, like, you didn't make it, so you're going to be a failure for the rest of your life.
There's a reason that Brene Brown says that shame is not an effective social justice tool. Oftentimes we use shame to combat people like the homophobes or people that are not like us. Oh, you're just an idiot. Oh, you're just a whatever it might be. The reason that's not successful in changing people is because you put a label on them, and whether consciously or subconsciously, they think therefore that they cannot change, right? And so it's the same for us when we think, I am a failure. Well, you're telling your ego, your subconscious, that's what I am. I'm not going to do any different. This is who I am. I'm just a failure. Therefore, let's continue to go down this spiral of ruining my life.
Yes.
This is a good time to talk about what you told me earlier that you learned from Noom. Can you give us those steps?
Yeah. So I'm doing Noom.
So what is Noom first,
Noom
in case people don't know?
It's an app to change your eating habits, to change, your goals for your body weight or, whatever goals you have. But it does it in a psychological way. So it's not like, eat this, eat that. It's more like, why do you eat that? Why do you eat this? Let's talk about it. Let's learn about it. And so part of it is cognitive behavioral therapy. And one takeaway that I recently had was this idea of a trigger equals a thought equals an action, which leads to a consequence.
Ooh, say that again. Trigger?
A trigger leads to thoughts,
Yes.
leads to action, and that leads to consequences.
Can you put that into context with your drug abuse from the past?
Sure. Oh yeah, definitely. There were, for example, I will drive by a hotel that I knew I once partied at with some random dude. And
there's so much about your past life that I don't know. Like, I just can't. I'm not trying to downplay it, and I'm not saying that like a person who uses drugs, it looks or acts a certain way, but like just because that wasn't in your life at the time, it's just wild to think about.
Yeah. So that's your environmental trigger. So then
you see the location.
You see the location, then you remember that experience. So then, if you're not aware of it, then you allow yourself to daydream about that experience. So then you think about it. And then you start
the endorphins to come up. Like your body already thinks it's happening. It's like being at the supermarket and your mouth waters because you're preparing for that food. You start rewarding yourself. You start feeling the pleasure of whatever you're addicted to before you have it, which then leads you to want to do it more.
Right? So, that's when the addiction is active, right? It started activating. So we say the relapse happens way before the actual action.
It's sneaky.
It's so sneaky. That's why they say never shop while you're hungry.
That's true.
Always eat and then shop.
That's what they say.
That's what they say. But I still buy those cookies.
I know I do.
And so then the thoughts of thinking about how good it felt then leads to this feeling of, oh my God, I need to do it. And
that's just the only logical thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Then you go through this period where you battle. Should I not? Should I do it? Should I not? And if you don't, at that point, that's like your kind of like threshold. If you don't seek help or reach out to somebody, then you most likely end up relapsing. And then you take the action. And then you take the action, which leads to, I missed work, or I went to the hospital because I partied too long, or, different kinds of consequences. Fortunately, I, didn't experience losing a job or, losing a job. Did I just say that?
You did. Hey, did you lose a job? Or a partner?
It's the weekend.
Your husband? Exhausted. You didn't lose. Well, you weren't married yet, but
or car, or your,
or your life, or the life of someone else. Life. Yes, it could have been so much worse.
And I'm grateful for that. But that could still happen. That's the thing with addiction, is that just because I'm sober now doesn't mean the work stops. At any time, something could happen, and I could potentially lose those things.
Right. Well, they say that, I'm sure you know more about this. They say that relapse is extremely common, right? And not to, what am I trying to say? Not to excuse it, but that it's extremely common to relapse.
It's part of the recovery.
Relapse is a part of the recovery. Yes. And I would imagine that one reason they say that not only is it because it's true, but they reinforce it, because I would imagine it would be so easy to add that shame on. God, I was doing so well. I should have been doing better. I'm a failure. Yeah. You know this about me. I haven't talked too much publicly about this, but there was a time where I was, and I know it's not the same as other drugs, but I was absolutely addicted to weed. And I would smoke weed every single night. And in breaking that cycle, I realized how in the trenches with my addiction to weed I was after 2 or 3 days of breaking free from that, because I didn't sleep. I lost 12 pounds. I had migraines. I had stomach aches. All of not sleeping through the night lasted, I want to say 3 weeks, which is exhausting. Yeah. On top of everything else. But I will say that in the conscious uncoupling of my relationship with weed at that time, I realized why I was doing it. And I don't think I knew it as much before. I think it was a coping mechanism from loneliness. I started smoking weed when every night when I went through a breakup several years ago, about 7 years ago at this point. And then in my next relationship, a couple years later, it was something we did together. And then during the pandemic, he and I would smoke weed and do this beautiful long walk in Outpost. I think I took you on it once, but like beautiful. And we did it every night during the pandemic and we smoked. So then when we broke up, a couple years later, when I broke the habit myself, I recognized that it was holding me to that ex. And I'm very, very much over him, but I wasn't over that experience of a companion to walk with on a nightly basis. Right. And then so when he was gone, I kept the weed, and it was almost like the weed was a ghost of him.
Wow.
And so I would go on a walk and I'd be like, I have to smoke.
Yeah.
I'd go to a movie. I have to smoke.
Right.
There are all these things. It's like, I'm going to eat. I have to smoke. Like all of these things that triggered me, but I didn't realize that until the substance was gone.
Right.
I want to share one thing that really helped me to break free from that substance, but I'm wondering if there's anything you can share from your own experiences. Like, what did you try? What did you do to kind of, go down more of a path of sobriety?
I think everyone has their own journey.
Sure.
So I'm not, I'm just sharing based off my own experience and not recommending any way to anybody. But for me, I did go through the AA program, which at the time really helped. I did 90 meetings in 90 days.
Wow.
And this is during the pandemic. So, meetings were on Zoom. So it was actually easier to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I don't know how it would be if I did that in person, driving every day to a meeting. And then I did therapy. And then I did my chanting and took part in volunteering through my Buddhist organization, which really takes you out of your ego. It takes, the activities take you out of the self so that you can come from a higher place of service. And those things really helped me see, I think, the roots to my addiction. And kind of going back to that first experience with my very first boyfriend, I think what was happening was that he was validating me in places where I didn't want to see myself. Either way, I was going to have to do the work to see myself.
Sure.
And now, 30 years later, I'm doing that work, right?
Yeah.
So you can either do that work early or you can wait and do that work later, which it's not wrong either way.
Right.
But
I think you're always doing the work too.
You're always doing the work. But I recognize that there's a connection to this needing external validation.
Oh yeah.
So after he was gone and I couldn't deal with myself, I knew that drugs brought that same high of being validated.
Yes, same.
Right?
Yeah.
So it really comes down to, for me, learning to just be with myself, learning to be with my thoughts, even though sometimes my thoughts are like, whoa, did you just really think that?
Right.
But really learning to appreciate myself in this moment, in this clothing, in this state of mind.
Yeah.
There were times where I had to force myself to go on dates by myself. I would take myself to a restaurant and treat myself, dress up nicely, look good for myself. I would go to the movies and watch a movie by myself.
Yeah.
To really learn to be comfortable with myself.
I love that.
And those are tools that I didn't have when I was younger.
Yeah.
It's a whole generational thing. We weren't that, awakened to these ways of thinking when we were younger. I think now the next generation has, they're a little bit more ahead,
right,
in terms of this kind of awareness. But
that's how we come into the world. And I do believe in ancestral trauma that we bring into the world with us. But for the most part, we come into the world comfortable. I mean, yes, we depend on people, but we're comfortable alone. The process you're describing is exactly what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast of unlearning the avoidant techniques of avoiding that discomfort, allowing yourself to be one thing that I did because I like what you said about getting to the root of the cause.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's very easy for us to say, and this is what I tried, y'all, when I tried giving weed up originally, was I'm just not going to do it.
Mm.
I'm going to go one night without doing it. Okay, great. Now I'm going to go 2 nights. And that's all well and good, but you're not getting to the source of why you're doing it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's kind of just putting a Band-Aid on cancer.
Yeah.
And so I started writing letters to weed. I would start personifying it.
Wow.
I would talk to it. I would write letters to it. I would thank it for what it gave me. Because here's the thing, y'all. You are in deep denial if you feel as if your compulsion is not giving you anything. Compulsion can be something as simple as weed. It could be other avoidance techniques like, sex, other drugs, alcohol. When done, in them of themselves aren't necessarily bad, but it's what is the intention behind them.
Right.
But it can also be a bad thought. It could be reinforcing that idea that I'm not enough.
Right.
I do this with my clients all the time. I ask them, what is the benefit for you to believe that you will never have your partner? People come to me, I'm never going to get married. I'll never find someone that also wants a monogamous relationship, or I'll never lose that weight. I'll never love my body, whatever. And I say, what's the benefit of that thought? Or what's the benefit of, for me, weed? And people will say, well, there's no benefit. That's crazy. False. If there was no benefit, you would not believe it. If there was no benefit, I would not have picked up the weed and smoked it every night. So if you continue to avoid the truth of what the benefits are, you're not going to heal. So acknowledge, what are the benefits of this? So for me, that was through gratitude. Thank you for accompanying me on my walks. Thank you for helping me to ease back into being single and be eased back into the comfort of just being. It almost acted like bubble wrap, right? And then the next stage of thank you, but we have to part ways now. I have to take the bubble wrap off now. And so first we acknowledge what are the benefits, but then you can acknowledge what are the benefits of not having that, of having a more empowering thought, or of living a more sober life. And then you get to decide, what do I want to reinforce? This idea that I need this every single night, despite the fact that I am groggy and, in a weird, foggy weed hangover the next day? Or do I want to reinforce this other thought that I don't need it? And it's a work. It's a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting to the root is so important.
Yeah.
I once told someone, a really wise person, I need to love myself more, to be sober. That's why I'm an addict, because I don't love myself. And he stopped and he goes, no, that's incorrect. You do love yourself.
Yeah.
That's why you were trying to protect yourself.
Sure.
Yeah. And that was like a game changer for me, because I was like, that is true in a sense. Like, it's our instinct to protect ourselves. Yeah. It's our instinct to not want to feel pain.
Yeah.
And so from a very profound place, I felt like, wow, I really do care for myself. Like, really, we all do care for ourselves.
Right.
It's there.
Someone told me that the most compassionate emotion is anger. And they said it's because your anger is trying to protect you from more vulnerable emotions. It is I think when we raise our consciousness, we have to recognize that that's holding us back at the end of the day. Yeah. But in the moment, that's okay. Yeah. Right? Yeah. To love you're loving yourself in the way that you know how.
Yes.
Talk a little more for people that don't know anything about Buddhism. Can you touch on what chanting is? Can you touch on what Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo means? Sure. And then I want to talk about what a campaign is.
Sure. I practice a particular form of Buddhism called Nichiren Buddhism. It originated from Japan through Nichiren Daishonin, who founded the term Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo, which is a Japanese title to the Lotus Sutra, which is the historical Buddha's greatest teaching. And I say greatest teaching because the historical Buddha had taught many different teachings.
Why did you just sound like a goat when you said many? Anyway, continue. More importantly, back to Buddhism. Did you hear that?
I did.
Many.
Maybe I'm channeling the goat spirits too.
Mm.
But so the greatest teaching, his greatest teaching, because in all his other teachings, he was teaching according to it was a caste system in India.
Mhm.
So if he told a bunch of rich people that all people are equal, then they wouldn't listen to him. So he had to tell them at first, like, only the rich are enlightened. So he was telling all these people about enlightenment in kind of a unique way based on who they are.
Oh my gosh. Can I pause for a second? It's so you're talking about code switching.
Yeah.
You're talking about like forming language around what suits different people.
Right.
There is and I don't remember what it was. It's in the Bible. It's like a first letter. It's to the Corinthians from Paul. And Paul is talking about code switching. I wish I knew what it was. But he says, when I talk to people in the church, I use different language than when I talk to people out of the church. When I talk to people, wealthy people versus poor people, men versus women. It's not as if the message is different. Words are finite, whereas the message of love is very infinite.
Right.
But I need to pick these finite words that make sense and connect to this person.
Yeah.
Which is so, I think, symbolic of I think that's what's so beautiful about our relationship is that you and I have very similar ideals and ideas around love and how self-improvement, how we want to treat ourselves, the world around us, and our higher power. But we grew up in different cultures, and we've parents from different countries, and we've learned different words to wrap around those same feelings. Absolutely. I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah. And there's so much value to that because you can talk authentically to individuals in a unique, authentic way. But those were kind of, as he says, his lower teachings. And what makes the Lotus Sutra very powerful was that once he taught everybody about enlightenment, he then said, okay, scratch everything I said in one kind of like big meeting. And he said, all people can attain enlightenment.
And they're like, what?
And they're like, what?
You lied to us.
Yeah. And so in Japan, Nichiren was like, oh, wow, this teaching is really powerful. He said that all people can be happy. And at the time in Japan in 1200s, there was a government that was just really forcing their views on the people. And Nichiren was like, no, I'm not about that. I am about everyone being autonomous in their own happiness. And so he actually kind of like Jesus really fought for the people, you know, and of course he was persecuted. Good people get persecuted. Yes. That is just a universal
truth.
Truth, you know, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, like everybody who has really fought for truth get persecuted. There is just this energy about negativity and positivity that fight with each other.
God, that's so true. And I feel that so wholeheartedly. And the louder I get and the more messages and the more followers on social media, and such a micro level of what we're talking about, I remind myself of that. The more hate I receive, I'm like, oh, I must be doing something right.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Even within ourselves too. Like when we feel uncomfortable, that means we're shifting, right? Because we're not comfortable. Like our body wants homeostasis.
100%. Your body does not want healthy. It wants normal.
Exactly. So anytime we change something, we start really challenging ourselves, we feel that discomfort.
Yeah.
So anyway, in that persecution, Nichiren gained a lot of followers because what he was saying was really touching people, you know? And it was during that time he was about to become beheaded by the government. Naturally. There was a comet that kind of flew by, and it scared the living hell out of the executioners.
Oh my God.
And Nichiren was like, come, kill me.
Do it.
And instead he was pardoned and he was exiled to an island. And so in this practice, we say that like when you truly believe in yourself, your environment will also believe with you.
Ooh, say that again. Say that slower.
When you truly believe in yourself, your environment will also believe with you. It'll reflect it.
I love that. I just love you so much.
I
know. This reminds me of what one of my friends this week said. And he said, that which you seek is seeking you.
Yes.
You put out the energy that you will receive. And that's manifestation, and that's chanting.
That's chanting.
So what does Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo mean?
So Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo means Nam is dedication, devotion to something, because when you dedicate yourself to a higher good, your body and life become that. Myoho is the kind of mysterious functions of the universe, how like perfect our bodies are. Like you cut yourself and then it just naturally heals in its kind of perfect way. So that's the mysterious aspects of the universe. Renge is the law of cause and effect. Every thought, action has an effect registered deep in our lives. And at one point in our lives, they manifest. So it can be good or bad, you know? And then Kyo is the vibration and the sound of Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo reverberating throughout our lives when we chant. So we chant Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo and repeat that mantra for as long as we want, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. We typically do it morning and evening to kind of set our rhythm. But when we chant, we think about anything we want. It's kind of like our personal diary with the universe. You know, like if you don't like to actually write, you can chant and have a spiritual diary.
Unless you're my client, then yes, do not deviate from writing. But I'll talk with my clients about that. Good. Yes.
So yeah, and when we chant, we increase life force, the same kind of life force that Nichiren was like, come, kill me, come. You know, so I do feel a difference when I chant wholeheartedly. I'm less swayed by life's kind of, murky bullshit.
Yeah.
I feel more, aligned with the universe.
You raise your consciousness.
And the environment also shows it. I've, experienced where I'm in rhythm with my life.
Yeah. Remember when I started, this kind of leads into a campaign.
Sure. Yes.
Talk about that first, and then I'll tell you what happened after I did my first campaign.
Yes. So in this practice, we like to constantly challenge ourselves to achieve, better and better. We don't just settle for one victory. So we do little campaigns where we say, okay, in 30 days, I'm going to chant, 10 minutes a day, and I'm going to attach it to a goal that I have, whether it's, I want to, be financially stable, or I want to have a healthy relationship with so-and-so, or I want to be more courageous at work, whatever it is, you just really chant and focus on that.
It could be anything, right? Like I think once I did, I let go of that which no longer serves me. One of mine was I find clarity in my purpose.
Yes.
So you set that intention and you set the intention to chant for X amount of minutes, either morning or night or both.
Yes.
And I would imagine, at least the way I view it, is like the more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Absolutely.
But it is whatever you choose.
Absolutely.
You commit to that for 30 days.
Yes, absolutely. There's no rule of how to do it.
Right.
It's really up to you and your determination and your state of mind.
And it's just repeating Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo, Nam-Myoho-Renge-Kyo.
Exactly.
So yeah, when I did my campaign about finding a clarity of purpose, I just felt for so long like I'm an actor and I enjoy that, but I also, it wasn't substantial and it wasn't sustainable. And I didn't like my day job of being a property manager. So I was thinking, what is my purpose? 30 days of clarity of purpose. And then I opened my business.
I remember watching you through that whole process.
Isn't it crazy?
It is so crazy, people. Like where he is at now, I'm just like, you are living proof of taking your life into your own hands.
Yeah.
You really are. And it's just incredible that you really did it. So I'm proud of you.
Thanks, fan.
Yeah, I'm really proud of you.
There is someone that's listening to the podcast today that is struggling with their own substance abuse. And y'all, substance abuse can be something like hard drugs. It can also, as far as this conversation goes, it could also be, an attachment to worry, attachment to what people think of you. It could be attachment to your phone and social media, needing validation, sex. It could be attachment to that shame of, I don't know how to break free of these thoughts that I'm not good. But there is someone that has this unhealthy attachment, whatever it might be, that's listening and very moved by you and your words. I want you to talk directly to them, to camera. And what do you have to say to that one person?
Thank you for that. As I share, I think I'm also talking to like the 17-year-old Michael as well.
Sure.
I just want to say it's okay. It's okay what you're going through, because life is constant change. One moment to the next, life is constantly changing, right? Our cells are getting older. Things are changing moment to moment. So nothing is the same ever. So it's okay if you're going through what you're going through right now, and it's not going to be forever. People are actually more willing to help than we realize. So, yeah, it's okay.
So put words to it. Also, put words to it and share. You said people want to help. Share with people that you're struggling.
Yes.
Without needing a conclusion or a so what.
Right.
And maybe you might not know what you need. Maybe all it is starting with saying, I'm struggling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if people want to reach out to you, Michael, how can they do that?
I am on Instagram. You can directly message me. Just mention, hey, from the podcast. But I am at Mike is ready. Just the way it sounds, because I am always ready. Mike is ready.
And I'll put that in the show notes.
Okay, awesome.
I love you.
I love you too.
I'm grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you too.
And I'm grateful for everyone listening and watching. And I love you guys.
It was fun.
Reach out to Michael. He's a wonderful person. You know that I love you as well, audience, listeners. And you know how to reach me as well. If you need anything, if you want to talk more about your own struggles or the shame that you're feeling around those struggles, you can also reach out to me. All you got to do is type the word help. You can DM me on Instagram, Eric Feltus. Go to my website, lifecoachingbyfeltus.com. Reach out to me. I love you, and I'm grateful for you. Bye.
Bye.